Welcome to the work session. Today's Tuesday, November 12th. I'm meeting today here at the Senior Center because it's a Tuesday. The court is otherwise in Village Hall, yesterday having been the Veterans Day holiday. First item on our agenda is discussion with folks from the Conservation Advisory Committee regarding their work on the proposed tree ordinance.
I'll just fill in that there's been a special committee working on this tree ordinance, but you're going to.
Yeah, I'm going to start off that way. Yeah. I mean, I could start. I wasn't sure if you have to wait. Can I start or should I wait for
Almost there?
Okay. He's going to put up the presentation again.
Okay. Ben, and then we were overseen by Nicole. So we reviewed over this, multi-year process, we reviewed dozens of tree ordinances, including many from Westchester County, such as Peekskill, Briarcliff, Tarrytown, Mount Vernon, Scarsdale, Hazen, Hudson. There's a lot of tree ordinances. And Pleasantville obviously doesn't have one.
And one of the few that doesn't have.
Yes. So that's, so we spent years, working on determining the right balance. And we also worked with trusted village planner, Susan Fiati, of BFJ Planning, who's worked on a lot of other draft ordinances and zoning for the village. So she's familiar with ordinance and zoning text. So the whole point of this presentation is really just to guide you through from a high level of what we're trying to propose.
Thank you, Ben. So if I'd like to go to the first slide, please. The ordinance starts with a policy statement. And I'll read the policy statement because I think it's got a lot in it. The Village of Pleasantville finds that the preservation of trees within the village is necessary to protect health, safety, and general welfare of Pleasantville. Trees provide shade, they impede soil erosion, they aid in water absorption and retention, they inhibit excess runoff and flooding, they enhance air quality, they offer a natural barrier to noise, they provide a natural habitat for wildlife, they provide screening, enhance property values, and add to the aesthetic quality of the community. So I don't think there's any disagreement with any of those. And I especially want to talk about the water absorption and retention and the runoff and flooding, because I think that's a big issue in Pleasantville, Lake Street and down by the other parts of the Sawmill. I also want to we have had a loss of canopy in Pleasantville and overall in Westchester of between 15 and 20% over the last 20 years, according to a study done by Andy Ryman at CUNY. So you can find that study online. Okay, next slide, please, Mr. Mayor. So the proposed ordinance includes some prohibitions. 1, you cannot cut down a tree without a permit. 2, you cannot damage the root zone without approval. 3, you cannot fasten signs, etc. to the trees and damage them. 4, you cannot clear cut without approval. And 5, which is also in the New York CRR, which stands for what? NYCR.
Code of Rules and Regulations.
Code of Rules and Regulations in the state is that you can't plant invasive species, which I think we don't want to do. If you have any questions about any of these, trustees and Mr. Mayor, please.
So while we're on this slide then,
just for understanding, questions for understanding.
okay, I'll come back.
Okay. Secondly, next slide. Regulated activities. So with a permit, you're allowed to remove a tree with a diameter at breast height of greater than 4 inches in the buffer. The 4-inch is about that, and at breast height, that's about this 4 feet off the ground. You are allowed to remove a tree of diameter breast height greater than 6 inches anywhere else. You are allowed.
What is the definition of buffer?
Buffer is already in the zone in the code, which is a front buffer, side buffers, and a rear
around
buffer.
a person's property.
Around a person's property, and it depends, the size of the buffer depends on the size of the lot. Regulated also is the removal of any specimen tree, which is a tree that has a diameter of 30 inches or larger. These are considered treasures in our landscape. The ecological value of these trees is immense, and we really want to preserve them where we can. Regulated is the removal of any native protected tree. That's also already existing code in NYCRR. And also regulated is the removal of any street tree in the village's right of way. Next slide, please.
Whoops, I went to.
Prohibitions. Back
Go to the
one
wrong
more.
slide.
Yep, back one more. Back.
Didn't we just do this? This was the slide we were just on. This is the
Yeah.
next-
I'm sorry, permitted activities. Yeah, thank you. Permitted to do is to remove any of the non-regulated trees. It's permitted to remove any dead or hazardous tree. We wouldn't want to stop anybody removing a hazardous tree because it might impact their house or their property or their lives. And also permitted is the removal of any tree required by any public agency or electric utility or cemetery association.
And disease trees as well, yeah?
That's dead or hazardous is considered
Okay.
diseased, yes, including diseased
Hmm.
trees. The approving authority in the code is the building inspector or the planning commission or the village board. Next slide. So if someone comes with an application to remove a tree, that application is favored if the tree is near existing structures. The tree removal will have a positive effect on the area, or if the property owner agrees to replant replacement trees. The application will be not favored if the tree is a specimen tree, that's something bigger than 30 inches. The tree removal will have a negative effect on the area, or the tree is on a list of the New York State endangered trees, or if someone applies to remove more than 5 trees in any 12-month period. Okay, so those are when the application comes, that would be favored if or not favored if. Okay, we also have a tree replacement plan in the ordinance. All trees that are removed are subject to a replacement, where we'd like to replace with 1 sapling per 6 inches of diameter breast height removed. So if you're removing a 12-inch tree, we'd like 2 replacement trees to be put in, 2 1-inch or 1.5-inch saplings. If possible, it'd be nice to do it on site so that the trees that are planted can replace the one that was removed. If it's not possible to be done on site, then we thought the homeowner would contribute to a tree replacement fund so that the tree could be planted somewhere else in the village. And the amount of that contribution is yet to be determined. And then we would like to have some compliance inspection by an approving authority a year afterwards if they were planting their own trees to make sure that they were healthy and doing well. We also have penalties for not following the ordinance, and those amounts are to be determined. We wanted some input on that amounts from you.
We had seen some ordinances pass fees that were too low and then realize it, and then have to go back and adjust it in the future, in the past. So it's something that we want to make sure the number makes sense. And the other thing about the tree replacement plan, this is separate from the existing 50-50 tree program that we have in Pleasantville. So this is a standalone approach. And just so you know, on the next or 2 slides, we're going to touch upon how many, there's actually a lot of space in Pleasantville to plant trees. And so that's why we have this tree replacement fund approach.
Yeah, so you can't really see it very well, but I have a copy in the car because I've been driving around and looking at possible locations of street trees. And actually everywhere I put a cross on that map is a possible location for us to put a street tree. And that's about 140 different locations where actually we've lost canopy, which ties in with Andy's study earlier. So
So those would be, well, we should come back to questions when you get finished.
Street trees are on street right away, on the village right away.
Village responsibility.
Yes. But that's why we prefer if it could be planted on the homeowner's property rather than, you know what I mean? As the first choice.
But the tree replanting fund could hypothetically go into street trees as well.
Yes, or onto people's properties as well. The 50/50 is only on the front yard, I believe, right?
Yeah, the replanting fee is for the whole village. So if you didn't have space or you didn't want to plant on your property, you didn't want to replant it yourself, you would give money to the tree fund and then we would find a place in the village and plant a tree to make up for the lost tree. That was the concept.
And we could also plant trees in other homeowners' yards so that we could start to rebuild the canopy that we've lost. And so last slide is questions that the board might have over any of these specifics.
All right, let me back up. I have a few
Yeah.
questions, no doubt others
Sure.
too. So, cannot clear cut is no different from cannot cut down a tree without permit, right? Is that kind of redundant?
I think there's a definition for clear cutting in the beginning of this ordinance,
Right, but
which,
you'd still need a permit to cut down even one tree.
yes,
So, and cannot plant invasive species. How does that relate to the potential removal of an invasive species?
Good question.
I'm not quite sure I understand.
So you have, somebody ends up with a bunch of, like Norway maples are now treated as invasive species, right? So you got a bunch of saplings that have turned into 2-inch trees because nobody was really paying attention.
Right,
Probably they should be removed, right? We don't want
Yes.
more of these,
right.
but is removing them a regulated activity, or is that an as of right activity?
So, can I say
I mean,
something or?
Yeah, go for it. I was gonna
So
respond. What do you think?
there was some disagreement among people in the committee on that particular issue, because it depends on how you kind of measure the ecosystem services that a tree is generating. But I think that it's definitely on the table that we could consider exempt
Yeah, I have a very big
invasive species.
32-inch Norway maple in the back of my yard,
Yeah,
and it's providing huge,
Right, so is that a specimen tree?
even
or
if it
it's
isn't invasive,
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a
little bit of a balance. Yes.
challenge there to figure that out.
I think that's something,
Right.
you know, worth debating.
So then nobody has the right to remove a street tree in the village's right of way as a private homeowner, right? Only the village can remove a tree it owns.
Yes.
And I assume you would imagine that the village would at least seek to follow the same rules we apply to a homeowner and replace trees in kind, right?
Hope so.
So if you have,
You're a government, though. I mean, governments do what governments
yeah,
do.
no, I'm not trying to be.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
the
we're not
village
trying-
should be
We're
following.
not trying to be
the ordinance.
hypocrites, right?
Yes.
So if you can remove a dead or a hazardous tree, a diseased 40-inch Norway maple,
Right.
there is no quid pro quo, or there is?
I don't think we got to the specific, I mean, we would like you to apply for a permit, but you're allowed to do that.
There's no quid
No
pro
quid pro
quo
quo
in the,
required.
in the.
So I mean, I say this, many times,
Yes.
many times, every year, there are a number of circumstances where a homeowner will come to us and say, the tree that's in the right of way is a hazard.
Yeah, and they're right.
I mean, they may or may not be right, but sometimes it's because they don't want the tree, but assuming they are right, and we agree and we take it down, is that a regulated activity? I mean, I say that in part because obviously it's a significant issue for the homeowner who needs to be rid of a tree that's a threat to their property. But I will also say we certainly had some streets that have had the street canopy significantly affected by the aging out of the tree canopy. Not anyone's fault, they're just all of the same age and starting to go south on us. And not everybody wants them back.
So you're talking
Right.
about in the public right of way?
Yeah, I mean,
right.
we had
So,
listed
yeah.
that as a regulated activity. So removal of any street tree in the village's right of way would be considered regulated.
In which case the village would apply to itself.
Yes,
Yes, in theory, yes.
hopefully.
I raised my eyebrows at this.
Okay,
No, but there has to be something hazardous in relation to it. They can't just
Yeah, and
decide.
We accept that a lot of the trees are aging out, and that's, you know, that's part of our push here is to get them to be replaced with a new healthy sapling that will grow, you know, over the,
Right,
and serve. over the
diversify the species,
Yes.
diversify the age.
and it'll serve
I get
the community
all of
over
that.
the next, you
So,
know, 100 years.
The concern is just removing and not replanting. That's really what we want to replant
Yeah.
the trees.
I totally get it. Approving authority, typically you imagine the building inspector. The
Yes.
planning commission would come into play in a circumstance where the site plan approval.
That's correct.
So what would you say, for example, in a circumstance where there is a buildable lot, a zoning compliant lot that doesn't have a house on it?
Right.
And someone is going to put a house on it and that requires removing a bunch of trees. What happens? That obviously would already be an event that goes to the planning commission.
Yeah, and part of the planning commission, we hope, is that there would be a replacement plan built into that application.
But
Based on this.
a replacement plan of,
As we state
for
here,
every 6 inches of
Yeah.
diameter.
one.
So, I mean, that could potentially be more trees than
Could fit on the
reasonably-
site, yes,
Right. And then you
absolutely.
could pay into this fund.
Fund, which
And
could
did you
then,
have, based on other communities, an idea of what that fee might be?
I mean, we had based it also on the cost of the trees. So, and then also making sure that from a compliance perspective, feeding that in. I want to recall, I want to say it was 250, something along those lines.
But there are also, I mean, with respect to site plans, there are clear cutting provisions in the draft ordinance as well that would. So it wouldn't just be regulated by permitting and tree replacement. There would potentially be certain limits based on clear cutting in general.
But
there could be, I mean,
You
we
know,
don't,
so like,
If
if
someone
you
wants
take
to
a
build that-
property that's all wooded, for instance.
Right.
Of which there are very few, obviously. You know, according to the current draft, which kind of like, I mean, there are two separate pieces, right? There's the development piece and then there's the homeowner piece. They're somewhat combined in this draft, and for the development piece, there was an attempt to kind of limit the extent to which you could just go in and cut down all the trees.
But I mean, so the Toll Brothers project is a good example.
it's a
which
good,
we're all
very good
familiar with,
example, yeah.
Where there had been a site that had devolved into commercial disuse. And it had essentially been developed on one side, a whole lot of impervious surface, bunch of buildings that needed a huge investment and weren't not likely to get it. Stormwater runoff, all kinds of problems. In the end, the Toll Brothers project arose. And that involved a lot of clearing of trees
Right.
for the wooded side of the project, right? So in your scenario, would that have meant that for every 12 inches of caliper of whatever tree was taken down, it would be multiplied out to
6.
6 inches.
Oh, I'm sorry, 6 inches, right? So that could potentially mean hundreds of saplings are required. And certainly a bunch of saplings were planted, but likely not enough to meet that standard.
Not enough, period.
Right.
No, yes,
So, yeah, so in that.
and that's why we've seen a 20% loss of canopy in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
That- That's one of the
But
projects.
but
that
in
comes-
that respect, we would take the money and we would plant trees in the 100+ locations in the rest of the village.
And that might be a $25,000 fee or something?
I mean, again, it depends on, it's based on the number of trees,
Yeah, I
but
understand.
yes.
And it's based
So-
on the fees that
Yeah.
we stipulate.
I mean, I just
Correct.
raise it because that's sort of the biggest example we have,
Mhm.
but
But so to go to a more smaller scale one, like the Girl Scout properties, right, that was just developed.
yes,
I'm sure a couple of trees were taken down. In,
you know, not much, because that, I
Not
mean,
much,
that was
right,
almost
because it was
completely
almost-
impervious surface.
so it was,
But there were some,
there
certainly.
was,
So-
yeah, on the Clark Street, there was a couple of trees taken down, or more than a couple.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how, if they have replanted
Yeah.
there, so, you know, that probably is how it will work.
I think practically it would be mediated by the planning commission, right? So the text right now reads, no person shall perform clear cutting as defined in this chapter on any property within the town unless authorized by the approving authority pursuant to an approved site plan, subdivision, or special permit application.
Yeah, that's the planning.
Right, there are
So-
lots of people, however, that end
So-
up, I mean, I don't, not taking a position on these people's choices, but certainly over the years, somebody buys a house, it has a narrow backyard and a heavily wooded section, and they want a bigger backyard. And they take down a lot of trees to make that happen. That's what they wanted. In your scenario, they would need approval to do that and then multiply the caliper of all these trees by the requirement to replace them or pay into a fund. Is that, we got that right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the last approving authority, you said the village board, what matters do you think might come that way?
The ones that can't be resolved in the planning commission.
So, but I mean, the average homeowner wouldn't need to go to the planning
No,
commission.
no,
Planning
you just go to
commission
the building inspector.
Right,
Get a permit
right,
and go ahead.
Okay, so then, and then others can pipe up as they will. So the among the issues is, you know, tree removal will have a positive effect, tree removal will have a negative effect, very much in the eye of the beholder, right? Some would
You
say,
mean in the determining factor?
yeah,
Yes,
who decides that?
well, I think. Good question.
So just for
Yeah.
example, Clark Street's a good example,
Yeah.
those two houses that were built, which honestly, you know, the subdivision of those two properties is what saved the big house.
Yeah.
And avoided subdivision of the big house into 3 or 4 more
Well,
lots.
that's a positive effect.
Yeah, well, right, but my point about that is some people came to me and said, you know, that should never have been allowed because there were trees there. Houses should not have been allowed to be built there.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a taking of a person's property value.
Well,
Based
I don't think we're,
No, I'm
Not
not
do
saying
that.
that.
Yeah.
I know you're not saying that.
Yeah.
Well, my question is, what are you saying in a situation like that?
I don't, is that even in the draft ordinance, that part of it?
what?
The tree removal will have a negative effect. I don't remember seeing anything in the draft ordinance that had to do with that specifically.
I think it's there in the determining factors, if you look in that section.
Okay, I'll look.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then,
But I think if they want to do something to enhance their property and they will replant the tree, you know, replacement tree, then that's considered a favorable application.
okay, and so.
We don't want to make it.
No, I understand, I get it. So then exceeding 5 tree removals in a 12-month period, if someone comes and wants to remove 6 trees.
Right.
Willing to pay into the fund, whatever it might be, would that be disfavored? And you'd have to come back a year later for the last one?
Well, I think that is just a limit on just a number in order to limit someone going and basically cutting down every tree.
I'm just not sure what that means, right? I mean,
It's just to slow down the process.
so if you wanted to take down 6 trees, you could take down 5 this year and
Yes.
wait till
One
next year for the other ones.
Yes.
I mean, does that make sense?
Maybe not,
I mean, if,
maybe. What was
I mean,
that?
sort of the,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but the core point of this from the homeowner's perspective is not to tell a homeowner what they can do or not do, but simply to say, if you do something, you need to either restore the future tree canopy on your own property or pay into a fund to do it elsewhere, right?
Yes,
In which case, happily, I'm not aware that we've ever had this circumstance, but if you had someone who wanted to take down every tree on their property, would we say no, or would we say that's?
well, I
gonna
think
cost a lot of
there's a
money?
point where there's a limit, isn't there? I mean, we do want to prevent excessive loss of the canopy. We're dealing with the loss of trees.
Does the
So
ordinance allow for the judgment of the planning board in determining whether just the fee is paid or whether there's prohibition at some point?
I think it does.
Okay.
Yes,
But the average homeowner would not be before the planning.
no, but I think it allows
Unless
the
we
building
change the rules of how
inspector,
this works, right?
I think it
Yeah.
empowers the building inspector to make that decision.
I don't know.
I don't know whether he
He
wants to.
wonders that too.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, some ordinances in the county have specific tree commissions separate from the
yeah,
building.
no, I
inspector.
understand. All right.
We didn't go that way.
In
We thought it was better
inspection,
to leave
Because you
it.
would have been sitting on it.
Inspection by an
I
approving.
volunteer on a lot of things. I'm happy to keep volunteering.
Tree replacement, trees get replaced. There's some proposed inspection by an approving authority the next year to make sure that A, it happened, and B, the trees are surviving.
Yes,
And that would be like, we'd hire a horticulturalist to go and look at them all, or,
An arborist to go.
An arborist.
Yeah,
and then in the hypothetical that someone didn't do it, that's clear. In the hypothetical where they did do it, but the tree doesn't appear to be prospering, are they then required in some way to remediate the problem?
I don't think we got
Okay.
to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not quite there to that level of detail yet.
Yeah,
just-
just some of the tree ordinances were more focused on people intentionally killing trees or not planting the trees. It didn't go into if you were,
I mean, I think if they make good effort and they
Yeah.
planted the tree, you know, I mean, what are you gonna say? You're gonna say, you know, thank you for making a good effort. You're not gonna
Yeah.
penalize them or anything at that point. I mean,
I
you know,
mean, as
they've
you
planted
know,
a tree, they've gone through trouble.
Whenever there's a rule,
Right.
people have a spectrum of opinion about
True.
how much of, you know, how rigid we should be about.
Yeah.
All right, so you identified all these street tree locations, and those are street tree locations that would be in the village's control. I can tell you, we've over the years had a bunch of rounds of street tree plantings. Most people are happy with them. Not everybody wants a tree, even in the right of way, even though in theory, they probably don't have the right to reject it. We generally have been responsive to that. So there's clearly a lot of potential, just a question of how much money we devote to making it happen.
Right, and we're hoping that
I just,
the payments into the tree fund
Yes.
will help.
I wanted to mention
Okay.
just as a piece of information, so New York City regulates street trees. So because obviously people don't have backyards as much in New York City. And if they do, that there's no law regulating that, but there is a law now, a pretty strict one regulating street trees and limiting you know, people's ability to take those down or to in some way impede the existence of a street tree.
Right, having
I'm not.
dogs peeing in the grates and all that.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting. I mean, it's interesting to see the
All
different
right.
models that exist there.
Anyway, I would go back to my initial statements on the policy, you know what I mean, statement that we've lost 20% of our canopy and we need a plan to replace it and, you know, and not lose any more. So that's basically where we're coming from. We don't, you know, we would like the board to allow us to move to the next step of specifically, you know, getting some numbers here onto these costs and then we'd like the board to have another meeting with us to open it to public
All
discussion.
right, did others have comments on the board? I think there's some people in the audience that have want to say something, but let's ask, are there other board comments, questions?
Plus in the audience first.
Yeah, this is.
Tom Rooney.
I would like to start out on a positive note, that I agree with all the good things that you mentioned about trees. But you'd have to be kind of from the moon if you didn't know all those things to be true about the goodness of the tree. Speaking from a resident of the village and not from any other authority, I think it's ridiculous that I cannot put my hand in your pocket, but you could put your hand in my pocket. I can't see how I have to pay a fee in order to cut down a tree that for any reason on my property that I would have to do it. It's not just, and then for me to contribute to a fund, it's not a contribution, it's another fee. It's a tax, another tax on us, the residents of this village. It's absurd. I know that there's other towns that are doing things like this, but I don't live in other towns. I live in this town. I don't care what they're doing in New York City. I don't live in New York City. On my block, Con Edison came through, found 3 trees, one of the village trees just last month that were, as I knew, 80% dead and a hazard to the lines, power lines, and to my house. They cut them down. One of them is town tree. The town tree person, Mario, came and looked, agreed, they had their whomever, I'll use arborist, I don't know if it is or isn't, come and look, and the trees had to come down. Now, just using that as one example, if you add up what I had to cut down, I just cut down the trees or had them cut down, and they were, the DBH of those trees jointly were somewhere around 96 inches. And if I go by your standards, I'd have to put up 16 more trees on my property to meet your standards. That's totally absurd. And if I don't put up 16 trees on my property, I have to pay a fee, not a contribution, to this tree committee, which is another hand of government in my pocket. I mean, it's hard enough to live in this town year after year with the increases of taxes. It's crazy. But I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here to discuss this plan is ridiculous. It absolutely is. For you to come in and tell me, or any resident, that I cannot cut down a tree, whether it be in bad shape or good shape. As far as the village planting a tree to get more canopy, you're not doing that. Because one of the trees on my property was a village tree. And I did have 2 more trees installed. I'm not opposed to planting trees. I like trees. I'm a woodworker. Wood grows on trees. And what I'm telling you is that they would cut down the town tree and they would plant. In this case, I needed 2 more because that's all that would fit on my property. But it could not be on the town property because the town does not want to maintain trees anymore on, let's say, homeowners' property, even though the first 10 feet is the town's. Now, my block alone on Hillview, that was the most beautiful street in this whole town, not so many years ago. But the trees are 60 to 100 years old, and several have died and had to come down. Nobody's come back and replanted the trees. If this is such a wonderful idea, why doesn't the town say, well, it's a town tree, the town tree died, I'm gonna come back, we're gonna plant a new tree on your property, which is really the town's property. Anybody gonna discuss that or have trouble with it? I personally would not. I mean, it's your tree. I love trees. But the thing being is, clear cutting is one thing. But for me or anybody else in this village to cut down a tree for any reason, good or bad, it's my business, not yours. The permits that you have to get, I have to pay a 25, well, according to what was on the literature, this is where the numbers come from, a $25 permit just for the privilege of having a discussion about cutting down a tree. And then if that tree is to come, it is to come down, and I'm not going to plant another tree, a maximum on that sliding scale that you have on one of these pages is $500. Another $500 out of my pocket to take down a tree that for any reason that I have to pay a fee into this fund, that fund could go on my neighbor's property. I love my neighbors, but I don't have the money to plant a tree on their property. So why would I want to do that? That's totally absurd. The clear cutting, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a big mistake that went on the O'Reilly's contractor on Clark Street. 2 trees that were not supposed to come down came down. Well, there's a building plan. There's processes involved. If it didn't follow a rule, then there should be a penalty. There should be a penalty for something like that, not for a homeowner doing something else. The approval authority, unless Robert Hughes has no work to do, he really is looking forward to being the person in charge and telling me I can't cut down a tree. I mean, that's totally absurd to let a person of that stature with his experience be the tree police. It's crazy. And as far as that goes, the planning board and the village board, you don't have enough work to do, so you have to put on something else. This is nuts. Okay, the tree replacement plan, is what I said, it's not a contribution, it's a tax. It's another fee on homeowners. The saplings, nobody's gonna, I mean, I cut down trees, I just planted 2 more trees. By the way, the 50-50 program in this village is wonderful. I paid into that. They did the trees, the people that you have doing it did and does do, they do, and they did an excellent job on my whole street. many people replace trees on our street. We own the street.
All right, that's what we're headed for. They're all
That's
yours.
it, That's it. The work session, the agenda that these gentlemen produced. You read through that, it's like I'm reading a lawyer's brief. Everything is in there in legalese, stating section, verse, and whatever else in there. And we're just homeowners. We just want to have our house the way we want our house. And this is absurd. So the bottom line with me is, I feel, and I would really like to say that this proposal to do this should just die in committee and not go any further than this point. Because I don't know what I would have to do, but I can tell you, maybe I have to get an attorney, but there's no way I'm paying anybody in this village into a plan to cut down a tree that I own on my property. It's our property. We should do what we want to do. We're not here clear cutting. We're not here for any other purpose other than we want to make our property safe and look nice for the village. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Tom.
Tom, can I ask you a quick question? So
Sure.
it seems like you make a distinction for clear cutting. I'm just curious
Yes, I
about
do.
that. So what would you imagine, like, how would you imagine that? being
What I
done?
imagine it in very simple layman terms. If I was the Toll Brothers, before they did that project,
Mhm.
and I'm sure they did this, their building permit that they applied for and what Robert Hughes agrees for what they're doing on that permit, it would say going forward that we have, all these trees, but we have to build this building that's going to take the tree. We have to cut the tree down. In that case, maybe the clear cutting of that many, clear cutting to me is you're cutting down more than 2 trees on your property. You're cutting down, you're a logger upstate and you're cutting down the trees for wood. That's clear cutting. Down here, clear cutting is no different, just smaller scale.
Mhm.
So for contractors doing that, they should be on this side with the restrictions, with the paying into a fee, with the doing whatever it is that you want the homeowners to do. Because they're doing something that's not, it's not existing. They're creating it. They had a lot that's wooded and they had to cut it down to build a house. This is not new. This is what you do when you build a house. You gotta clear the property.
Mhm.
And so clear cutting to me is not something that I was gonna say a normal resident, but they're hard to find. That the normal resident is not gonna go through and say, I don't like that tree anymore, I'm cutting them down. I mean, I don't know anybody who does that. I mean, I didn't want to cut down these 3 trees, but after listening to Con Edison and knowing a little bit about a tree that's gonna fall on my house or their wires, it's a no-brainer, you have to do it.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I don't see the
No, you
typical,
did. Thank you.
I don't see the
appreciate
typical homeowner clear cutting trees. They don't have the means or the desire.
Thank you.
Thank
Michael
you.
Peffer, do you had a thought? I have that picture you sent. You want it on
I
screen?
do, we may not have time for that, we'll see, but I'll just limit, hi, Michael Pepper, 6 Green Meadow Road.
Ex-trustee.
Stand here. I, for efficiency's sake, I have just like 2 or 3 minutes. So first I want to say I also am a lover of trees. I also voted for the leaf blower ordinance, so I'm very supportive of these measures generally, and I think I'm supportive of some kind of tree ordinance that focuses on truly bad behavior. But I'm also concerned that this ordinance will catch a lot of other behavior in its net. Tree management that removes invasive species, for example, tree management that prevents overcrowding on property, or even simply balances sun and shade on a wooded property. So from my own experience, I've owned 2 properties in the village. The first one I moved in I counted 90 trees on the property on Brentwood Drive. It was marketed as a tree house by the realtor. And previous owners had done literally nothing to the property in terms of managing growth. The Norway maples had, of course, crowded almost everything out, and I had arborists come out, and the ground literally was never dry, like at any point. There was no sun hitting the property. So the home had constant seepage and moss and mold and other such things. So I removed about 20 trees out of 90. So we're talking about percentages. I don't know what that is. Is that clear cutting? I had 90 trees and I was dealing with it in the way that I knew how. Later, I also topped 2 trees that were between my property and another neighbor's property for more sunlight that were on the south side. My current property is only 1/3 acre, and I counted today, I have 47 trees that would be affected by this ordinance. So my arborist visits annually and describes it as a healthy forest, which is nice. I didn't plant it, but I'm glad it is. I have some glorious specimen trees, including the copper beech of 40-inch DBH. So some beautiful stuff. But several large trees are crowding each other out. And also the tall trees along the road on the west or south and west side prevent us from growing vegetables in the built-in garden beds, which we inherited from the previous owner. They also make solar panels impossible. And we've had someone come out and say, this is not possible with this canopy. They're also growing near the power lines, but not in such a way that Con Ed will do anything about it. So this is my primary task and expense as the outside of my house is tree care. I just had several $1,000s of safety pruning done last week. And that's something I have to do every year. And so I'm saving up money to do more work next summer, and specifically, that's the photo, there are 10 cedars along Church Street where Church leads into Bear Ridge. They're around 8-inch DBH. They were topped years ago where that red line is by a previous owner. You can see they've continued to grow. And the plan was, until tonight, I guess, to top 7 of them, because topping is included in the ordinance, and remove 3 of them, which are trapped underneath the sugar maple, and so they're not thriving. They have no chance of thriving because they're trapped. The price quotes were between $4,000 and $7,000. So I'm gonna wait till next year because it's a lot of money and I just spent several $1,000s. So I have 2 questions tonight, one in general and one specific. The general one is, why could I not remove a Norway maple of any size? When land conservancy organizations in New York suggest removing Norway maples and not ever planting them again, even if it were 30-inch DBH, why couldn't I remove an invasive Norway maple? And then second, specific to me, can I do that work that's on the street?
Oh, sorry.
Under the ordinance, or would I have to pay fines for these 10 trees? In addition to the thousands of dollars for the work, and if I can't do that work, why? Like, what's wrong with that work? Thanks for listening.
Okay, other comment?
Yeah, I'll come over here. Hi, I'm Ellen Norton, 33 Hillview Drive. The tree line street, well, of yesteryear now being replanted at times. So I can tell a lot of thought went into this. I didn't realize it had been years had gone into this. Of course, I share the love of trees, like I think we all do. So I moved here in 2017. Since I've moved, I have planted 34 trees on my property. And I am cultivating volunteers of trees, native volunteers in my backyard, 24 of them. And if this goes forward and passes, I'm going home and I'm chopping down all the volunteers. Because I don't want to have to come get a permit to take care of something on my own property. And I'm a tree lover. Frankly, I really feel it's none of the local government's business. Not to be rude, but I urge you to reconsider these efforts and direct them towards developers, commercial developers, and people who are buying large properties and building on them. And also to redirect some of it into goodwill energy so that people like me and Tom Rooney and Mr. Papard, like all of us here love trees, and we want to see, like, I'm concerned that the canopy is going down. But unfortunately, the way some of these local ordinances come across is it's become like a nanny state and a finger wagging and telling me what to do in my own property. And that makes me reluctant to want to cultivate more, thinking it's going to put me back thousands of dollars when my kids are in college, and I'm not gonna have thousands of dollars just to burn on tree maintenance and permitting, and so, it really puts the brakes on, unfortunately, planting more on my property, and you can tell that I'm a tree lover. I've put so many on there. Find the developers, something like what happened, before with these trees being cut that weren't supposed to, find them, like shame them, like do that. Don't punish me and good, well-meaning citizens for somebody else's crime, please. And also, just also on a personal note, I grew up in Miami, Florida. When I was 12 years old, a 120-foot tall oak tree crashed onto my home during Hurricane Andrew. I was in the house when it could have killed us. It was a healthy tree, it looked fine, right? Beautiful specimen tree. And it crushed our home, or part of our home, while we were inside. So, I sadly had to have, an oak in my backyard taken down last year. It was ill. An arborist said, yes, it's whatever percentage dead. It's either gonna fall on your neighbor's home or your home. So I got a bunch of different quotes. I can't imagine going through that process. There was a tropical storm brewing in the Atlantic as I was making these calls. It was the one that went to Maine instead of coming up to us. I can't imagine having to trouble my local government to have to come be step 5 in a process that I needed done because there was a danger of a rare storm coming, which luckily it didn't. So like I say, there's a lot of goodwill, like we all want a green and beautiful Pleasantville, it's part of our logo. However, unfortunately, an unintended consequence of passing something like this is either non-compliance or digging in the heels and resentment of otherwise good, well-meaning citizens who want to do the right thing anyway. Please redirect the energy of this really, lots of effort that has been put into this. Please redirect it towards developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a couple of questions. This 15 to 20% number, do we know A, where it came from, and B,
Josh Morello.
oh, sorry,
Right.
Josh Marlowe, 66, Sunnyside.
Right.
B, how much of that do we know is attributable to just disease and not Toll Brothers or George or?
So the person who could really answer that is Andrew Ryman, who's not here tonight because he's a scientist who's been working on this. And I don't know if you guys remember more than I do, but my sense is that it's predominantly from development. Would you agree with that? Does that strike your,
I don't think so, actually. I think that was one of
Really?
the problems. But yeah, no, one of the people on the committee actually is a professor at CUNY. And he's the one who has access to all the data. My understanding, when we go back and look, is that unfortunately, it wasn't mostly development. From what I recall, it was a lot of significant portion
individual,
was
yeah,
individual homeowners.
yeah.
If it was as easy as just going after the development side, we would have gone down that path first. But the challenge is that there's way more canopy that's being cut down. And that was really the focus. We were trying to figure out how, the focus really was on how to protect the canopy, not on the individual trees, but that was gonna make it very difficult to calculate a percentage of canopy loss versus just trees.
So if
we
I
ended up,
you correct me if I'm wrong, if I recall, Andy's analysis and his department's analysis is based on comparison of aerial photos at various points in time. And so obviously there's a little wow and flutter in that. But the other interesting piece about that is in the scenario that a gorgeous 50-inch copper beech dies and is taken down and is replaced by 10-inch-and-a-half saplings that will someday be that piece, that gorgeous specimen tree, but not for a long time. I assume Andy's analysis says big loss, right?
Mhm.
So part of Pleasantville's problem, certainly in our street trees, has been too many of them. So first place, too many of them were the Norway maples, but also planted at the same time, all coming to the same period of uncertainty about their safety. So
I mean, the other thing that just so it's clear, is that you didn't have to get a permit if it was a hazardous tree. So the ordinance had a provision where you could just take down the tree. So you wouldn't wait. If the tree's hanging, you wouldn't say, let me file the permit, wait to get a response. You would just take down the tree and then you would follow the permit after.
But you'd have to have some letter from an arborist saying it was.
There would be, yeah, photos or something, correct.
Gotcha.
None of this is really addressing the question I asked, which is, do we know roughly what percentage of the 15 to 20? Let's just accept it face value for a moment, and it is 15 to 20%, which I'm hugely skeptical of, partly for the reasons you mentioned, which is.
No, it is. I mean, there's data.
All right, well, whatever, keep going.
Okay.
But even if you accept it at face value, what percentage of that is just from trees being diseased, old age?
I don't think Andy's data specifies.
I don't think that data has
I
ever
don't
been
think the
captured.
data is that level.
We don't know.
Hugely
Well, I'm-
important to whether or
No,
not this is
sure it
necessary.
isn't, but yeah, he's just not here, I think is the problem. Yeah,
And one other thing I
If
want,
somebody said that 90% of it was disease, we'd be layering this huge bureaucracy over a problem that has nothing to do with the intent of the rules.
no, it's definitely not predominantly disease. I mean, there's definitely a shrinking, but I remember that it's shrinking more in certain areas than others. Mount Pleasant in particular has lost a huge amount of canopy, and I do think some of that is due to development.
Not captured
so-
by any ordinance we would have.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
I also
so,
want to say
I mean,
the intent of the ordinance is not to add taxes or fees. We even thought just having a permit process with no fees.
Well, that's gotta be.
In order for us to be able to understand what was happening.
But even if we had to
Right.
get an arborist to come and look at a tree to come down, who's gonna pay for that?
No, I understand.
I mean,
Right.
it's not.
No, but I mean, we thought that we would just like to get an understanding of what trees were coming down and for what reasons over a period of time. You could do this whole thing without any fees. Right?
Well, you're
We
on
haven't
track.
specified any fees at all. You know what I mean? We don't want to put a burden.
Tom, are
on-
you for or
That's
against?
right.
No, I mean, we have thought about that. That's why there's no numbers attached to any of the fees in here.
But they are in your report.
No, that.
right, so
Can you guys,
But
can you guys
yes.
talk for a second about the problem with the commons? 'Cause one of the things I hear a lot in people commenting, and it's not just limited to this, it's like, what I do on my own property is my own business, doesn't affect anybody else. Why should government get involved? What's your perspective on that?
I mean, the problem is that the community, from the environment, I mean, your property, I mean, the environment around your property is affected by what you do. And it's the same with the value. If you clear cut like your property, it lowers the overall value of the neighborhoods. So there's an incentive, not just from an environmental, but from a financial. So that was some of the reasons. This is not just like, hey, we want to protect the trees for the, birds. But it also is, if you look at the streets that are really very costly in Pleasantville, Ashland, Clark, they have these beautiful trees, sidewalk lined.
Clark doesn't really have that.
Not anymore.
Well, they
If you
used
look at
to.
my map, there's a
They used to.
identified on Clark, quite a few locations as to
Yeah.
what should.
Hasn't
be-
had much.
Used to.
Whatever.
But I'm saying they used to.
So one thing I'm wondering, because this came up another time, is would there be a way to? So you mentioned the commons, David. So I think part of what he's referring to is that there's like the private property piece of it, right? But there's also the sense in which we benefit collectively from having a healthy canopy in Pleasantville. So obviously, one way in which we can do that is planting trees in the public space. So I'm wondering, is there a way in which we could really dramatically increase the street planting program and have a more robust,
Take your sketch.
I mean,
Well,
it seems
I
to
mean-
me like that would be a good place to start, if there's a lot of anxiety about regulating private property. I mean, certainly what we do, and Ellen, I appreciate that you planted all those trees, what we do on our private property affects all of us, right? It doesn't just affect us. It'll have an impact in terms of temperature fluctuations as climate change continues to make the temperature all crazy. It'll have an impact in terms of helping with flooding and issues and runoff and issues like that. But I understand all the problems that you have spoken of, and I also have a number of trees on my property, and it's very expensive to take down trees, right? To begin with, and so when you do have to it feels very onerous to have to take down trees. So if you're the kind of person who doesn't want to just willy-nilly cut trees down, this could feel like an additional burden. So I'm wondering if one approach as like, a first step could be a more aggressive street tree planting program that really tried to take on the problem of these aging trees. Because as Peter mentioned, we do have these streets that used to have all these grand trees, and some of them are just aging out, and we will pretty soon end up with certain streets where there are very few street trees if nothing is done. So I'm just throwing that out there.
So we're at 8:05 and gotta go to a regular meeting. Thank you, Yemi, for tracking down Andrew's map, which is there, and we can post that to get on the web. The redder it is, the greater the loss, the greener it is, the greater the gain,
In Pleasantville.
from
In
2011 to 2021 in Pleasantville. So whatever, we can pass that around, whatever. But I think what's clear, obviously, about all of this is that there are lots of issues to be teased out, and we need to keep talking about it. And thank everybody who came and spoke tonight. Thank you guys for this and all the people who are working on it. Sounds like we can see what arises out of the stew of comments that are now in the mix.
So what would you like us to do?
So let's think about that a little bit. I'm not certain what the answer to that is. See what everybody else thinks, but let's think a little bit about what we've read tonight.
What I would like to see is a phased entry plan. Because I do think it makes sense to, I don't think we're gaining anything by not knowing exactly what's going on. So maybe if there were a year where there weren't fees, but outside of emergency circumstances, you were required to file a no fee permit. And we could block clear cutting. And the other thing I really would like to see in the plan is when developers are implementing larger projects, that we require an arborist to be on site when the cutting is done to ensure that the approved plans are followed. Because that has been a problem on more than one occasion. It's always cheaper for the developer to just go ahead and get things out of the way and ask for forgiveness later. So I think having somebody there could say, no, sorry, you're not touching that tree would be better.
I'd also just like to add, I wonder if there's a way we can shift the ordinance to, and I'm sort of early on this brainstorming idea, but instead of to the homeowner, to the village, like where we cut down a tree and are replanting and our inventory for village trees.
Well, that's basically what I was saying as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So one thing
But
is
that the
that
ordinance is really not for the homeowner.
one thing is that the CAC has been working on a tree inventory, and they've been using this app, and that's been something that's been kind of in the works. Like there have been high school students who have volunteered, for instance, to help with that. And something like that, if we could develop that more robustly, would help as well, to have a sense of, how many trees we're actually losing and that kind of thing.
All right, all good
Yeah.
thoughts.
For me, and I think that, I think it's important that we have this dialogue to begin. I commend you on your work, and I know you're working on this, putting a lot of effort into this. It's not just we're not just starting from scratch. I mean, there's studies that have been done. They've been utilizing examples from other villages. Obviously with us, I think we still have a lot to look at. Obviously it's concerning, that map that we just saw, of how much canopy we've lost. Again, I think I do agree with my fellow trustees that is it possible we attack it from the village side first and then see, but I do understand a lot of your concerns and that, private residents, we are not trying to infringe on your liberty to what to do on your own property. I supported things like the leaf, the gas, well, because I think it was more geared towards more attainable, where it wasn't big burden on people's liberties. I believe, in my opinion, it's just by seeing it and even changing my own, I have my own, electric power motor machine. So I think that there is, a start that needs to happen, and I think we're in that start. I think people got a little nervous that it looks like we're moving really fast and that we're trying to do something immediately, but I think it's more important to get out there and be able to speak and be transparent of what we're discussing and seeing of what directions we can move. But we've definitely been heard by the public today that, it is a lot, something that we still have to work with and try to figure out what's best for everyone. But I appreciate everyone taking the time to, it's a bit complicated of a situation, because I think there's a lot of questions we all have. So I think obviously we still have a lot to work on.
All right, I thank you all. Sorry to push you along, but we're 10 minutes late for our regular meeting.
You can stay, guys.
If you want. It's really,
I know. Michael.
all right,
Any of my students who are still on, you're welcome to leave
all right.
or stay.
All right, good evening all. Welcome to the village board meeting for the village of Pleasantville. Today is Tuesday, November 12th. As is, could we ask you guys to continue out in the vestibule there? Tom, could you guys talk out there? We got to start the regular meeting. All right, today is Tuesday, November 12th. We're meeting on Tuesday instead of Monday because Monday was Veterans Day. Our next regular meeting is almost 2 weeks from now on Monday, November 25. Work session at 7, regular session at 8. As always, you can pick up Zoom links for this and other meetings at pleasantville-ny.gov. We encourage you to sign up if you care to do so for news and agendas that can be sent to you automatically by email. Again, you can find that in the left column at pleasantville-ny.gov. And lastly, you can pick up on-demand webcasts of this and previous meetings at pctv76.org. So I had a couple of announcements to make before we head to our resolutions. The first is very timely, and that is that we're currently under a red flag warning, no open flames, in effect for the lower Hudson Valley. As everybody knows, it's been extraordinarily dry. There are forest fires that have cropped up. A parks worker was killed fighting a forest fire in Orange County. There are forest fires going on in New Jersey. It is critically important that nobody be lighting anything outside because everything has such a likelihood to catch on fire. At the same time, just today, the county executive's office forwarded a warning from the New York City water supply, which is the system that supplies water to all of us, issuing a drought watch, which is the first stage that could accelerate the drought warning. It has been so dry, so little rain, that the drought watch currently requests that everybody be mindful about water use, try to minimize water use wherever possible, and make sure that there isn't any wasted water with plumbing leaks and unnecessary sprinkling and the like. So very important that everybody pay attention to that. It's been extraordinarily dry. So on a much more positive note, we had a really nice Veterans Day ceremony yesterday, Monday, November 11. Thanks to the members of the Fencher Nickel American Legion Post who are always central to that ceremony, and thanks to all the veterans that came. Big shout out to Boy Scouts Troop 12 and to the 5 young men and women from Pleasantville High School who came and provided some vocal selections for us. Really very beautiful and very impressive work by very talented people who, as I said yesterday, have other places they might be and chose instead on a day they have off from school to join us for Veterans Day. So thank you for that. Big successful Ragamuffin Parade back on Sunday, October 27. The usual crowd of ghouls and goblins gathering in Pleasantville and marching down Bedford Road. Shout out to everybody who participated. Thank you to the middle school band for leading us down Bedford Road as they always do. Thanks to Billy Flukes for leading the parade in the new 6-seater golf cart Flukes mobile, decorated for Halloween, and particular thanks to all of the folks at the Pleasantville Parks and Recreation Department who work so hard to make those events a success. Really a great thing. And a couple of things I wanted to comment on. One is there's been a lot of chatter about the school district's plan for artificial turf and lights at the high school main field. That is a school district issue and not a village issue. But the piece I wanted to comment on is lots of folks have said, well, why isn't this going on at Parkway Field? Why don't we turf Parkway Field? Why don't we add more lights to Parkway Field? Wouldn't that be a more appropriate place to do it? So I have 4 things to say about that. The first is there are quite a few neighbors around Parkway Field, just as there are around the schools, and those folks have the same concerns about noise and traffic and light and all of that. So wherever these activities occur, obviously has an impact on the neighborhood, and whatever neighborhood it is, that fact shouldn't be forgotten. The other point I wanted to make is that in the case of the village, not speaking in any way about what the school is seeking to do, the village, if the village were to propose a significant turfing lighting project at Parkway Field, we've run preliminary numbers, that would almost certainly produce a legendary tax increase, likely the biggest tax increase anyone can remember. And that would be in addition to whatever tax increase occurs through various other means. So lastly, a third item I wanted to point out is that the choice of artificial turf in the case of the village is not only an initial expense, but a commitment in perpetuity to keep it up. The turf lasts 10 or 12 years. And so we've run the numbers in various ways to say, okay, if we were to turf Parkway Field, what would it cost day one? Answer is a lot, obviously dependent upon the scope of the project. But secondly, you not only have to pay for the bond that you would take out to do it initially, but you then have to start squirreling away money annually to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in order to have enough money at the end of 10 years to replace the turf. And that's a cycle that goes on every 10 years or 12 years, however long the turf lasts. So it isn't just a one-year purchase, it's a commitment to provide artificial turf going forward. So then the last point I wanted to make is just to be clear, Parkway is a village-owned property, and the folks that pay for Parkway Field are village taxpayers. There are quite a few village taxpayers who are not in the Pleasantville School District, and there are quite a few Pleasantville School District members who are not village taxpayers because the borders of the school district are different from the school district. So I simply wanted to point out those points simply to say, folks who feel like there's an easy answer and it's Parkway need to dig into it a little bit further and understand the ramifications of that. That would be a very, 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 very big expense. Recognize also that the school on their projects gets state aid, the village gets none. So just wanted to throw those things out, taking no position on the school district. That's a matter between the community and the district. But on the village side, there are some important points to be made. Clearly, there was concern about the condition of the field. The aforementioned drought has produced a dusty, difficult circumstance at midfield. We're well aware of that, working to reconcile it. We're talking to various consultants. What can we do to improve the turf we have? But I can say when we have lots of football teams playing on a grass field, coupled with an extremely dry, really historically dry month of October, you're bound to end up with some dusty fields. I will say the low HUD report of Pleasantville Panthers win over Byram Hills referred to it as a classic setting. So there you have it. So far in Pleasantville at Parkway Field, classic, not plastic. I say that not to suggest that we don't want to provide the best possible fields we can realistically provide for our kids to play on and our adults to play on. We do, we're working on it, we're open to the discussion. So Eric, could you just give a quick rundown on Manville Road? We're about to see milling and paving.
Yep, milling and paving of Manville Road between now Cooley Street and Tompkins Avenue is scheduled for next week, so November 18th through the 22nd. The paving hours are going to be 9:30 to 3:30, so we're going to have some parking restrictions and then limit travel on Manville Road to one eastbound lane. So westbound traffic will be detoured during those hours to Bedford Road. We are hoping that it takes less than 5 days. And if the weather cooperates, that's a good possibility, but we are notifying of 5 days.
And it's correct that when the paving is done, the road will be restriped and there will in fact, be a right-hand turn lane from Manville onto Wheeler.
That's right. Yep.
No,
Well, right.
there's a left, there are two lanes going over the bridge from Grant towards Wheeler and Washington. That's what you're asking?
No, he's
No, I'm
saying-
over the bridge. There's gonna be two lanes, one's a straight and a right,
Yeah,
and then one's a left turn only.
A straight and a right.
yeah, because right now the people are complaining because we're in a temporary condition and, you know, we can point out the state does not use stripe for temporary conditions. But in the temporary condition, there's an indicated right turn lane, but there's not actually enough room to
Correct,
get
correct.
two cars side by side in the indicated lane.
Yeah, so it's not a right turn lane. It's for anyone going straight or turning right.
Well, but either way, I'm saying
Yeah.
there's
No, I
two
understand.
lanes, but there's
Yes.
only one and a half.
And it's narrow,
lanes
and
right
that'll
there,
get resolved for sure.
Yeah,
I do want to point out, you know, in the end, there was some chatter also this weekend on Facebook about the timing of the lights on Manville, state road, state lights, but we are talking to HVEA, our traffic engineers, and likely can propose some improvements there, right?
Yep, after the project is all wrapped up, we'll bring them out to updated counts during morning and afternoon rush. And then submit a updated timing plan for the DOT to consider implementing, which they likely would.
On a brighter note, I personally have been paying quite a bit of attention to the new light synchronization we have on Bedford at Wheeler, at Marble, and down by Key Food. And I think it's significantly better. Has anyone else had a similar experience?
I've noticed the same,
Yeah.
on Wheeler and Bedford.
So long time coming, a lot of work to make it happen. It's not just a matter of flipping a switch, but I do think it's a substantially better circumstance. So we'll look forward to comment from anybody who has a thought on that. Pool project is rocking and rolling,
That's right.
going along currently on schedule.
That's right. Weather has in one way been to our benefit, and we're keeping to schedule now. But things are progressing, so we'll stay ahead.
All right. The holiday lights are starting to go up in the trees. Already getting positive comment about it.
Yeah.
It looked so great last year and we'll do so again. So that's an exciting development. And then the lighting ceremony, Paul, Saturday, the 12th, or the 7th of.
The 7th, correct.
Yeah.
So, we have, it's Saturday the 7th, it's at 6 p.m., just a reminder, everyone, we moved it up an hour. It's still being, the hot chocolate is still being sponsored by Pace, they've been really great about doing that, so we'll have hot chocolate. The village will also be giving out, cookies that they got from, John Jocks, and I think they'll also be giving out candy as well. We've hired a band that played at the pool this summer. It's a local band that has a lot of, the drummer is a 5th grader in Pleasantville, and his father's one of the lead singers and guitarists, and it's a band that played in a lot of different local areas, and we've used them in the village before, so we're looking forward to having them there. Mike Newman is looking into either Girl Scouts troop or one of the chorus groups from either the middle school or BRS to also be available. And the chamber is looking to try to see what other aspects we can get to just kind of make the event really lively. We will have Wooden Fire and Southern Table combined, so they're going to have burgers and they're gonna have pizza available there for anyone that wants to go there and have food. But we're also communicating with a lot of our members who are gonna be doing either running specials or running different things that they're doing that day to promote people going out either before or after the event, since the tree lighting itself will be done by about 7 p.m. So it'll be exciting. I think it'll be really good to just see. I've discussed with a lot of people who will be around that Saturday, so we're looking forward to hopefully having a lot more people.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for all of that. Anybody else have other announcements of any sort to make? I have one more that is only viable in a few days, and perhaps no one is listening that would need it. Up until this Friday, the rec department has a box down at the rec department on Marble Avenue, taking used but clean and serviceable Halloween costumes that can then be stored by the village and be used for the costume swap next year, so if little whoever has grown out of SpongeBob and won't be doing it again, head on down to the rec center, but only until this coming Friday, to recycle that so it can be used by somebody else next year.
And I do have one more announcement.
Go.
So Wicked is coming out on November 22nd, so Jacob Burns has joined a lot of the businesses here in Pleasantville, and they've done promotional where a couple different places that are going to participate. There's going to be flyers that are going to be put out. Kimberly House, Second, Mouse Cheese, Soul Brewing, Rhoda's, Twin Jewelers of Pleasantville, Crawdaddy's, Freddy's, Falafel Taco, and the Village Bookstore. A lot of them are going to be running promotions that if you buy a ticket and you go to their establishment, there's discounts that you can get. So this is promoting people going out to see the movie, but also shopping or going to restaurants in our local village. And this will be starting essentially when the movie comes out on November 22nd. These specials will be in effect. So just keep in the lookout. You can check on the Pleasantville Chamber website, and as well as Jacob Burns Phil Center will have these announcements who they're working with to do this cross promotion.
Should be an exciting time.
Yeah.
All right, other announcements of any kind? With that, we will head to our resolutions. Let me share my screen. Okay, all 375. Yeah.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the Pleasantville Music Festival to be held on Saturday, July 12th, 2024.
25.
25 should be.
Yes.
We'll amend that, sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. I am happy to report that our presenting sponsor, Northwell Health, the operators of both Phelps Hospital and Northern Westchester Hospital, have signed on again and will be our presenting sponsor this year. So a very big thank you to Northwell Health. They are lead in line making the Pleasantville Music Festival possible. As perhaps you have heard in our previous work session discussions, lots of talk about ways in which we can both buffer our risk against bad weather, but also improve the festival in various ways. And I think there'll be some nice and interesting reports to be had on that in the weeks and months to come. 376, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following budget amendments for fiscal year ending 2025 as listed below. $8,500 from contingency to fiscal agent fees.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's the cost of our bonding for the pool.
Okay.
Bond anticipation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. David, 377.
Resolved, the Village Board of Trustees hereby authorizes no parking restrictions on Manville Road between Tompkins Avenue and Cooley Street from November 18th, 2024 to November 22nd, 2024 between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. to include the following intersections with Manville Road, Grant Street, Vanderbilt Avenue. Then be it further resolved that the Pleasantville Police Department is authorized to tow those in violation of this order.
Is there a second?
Can I make one motion to change Tompkins Avenue to Cooley Street?
You can.
Accepted.
Approved by the,
I'll second.
okay. This is the project Eric just referred to, the repaving project. And we've made the school aware of this as well because it will have an effect. Obviously, on the afternoon, not in the drop.
And we have some added place presence during that?
We will.
Okay, good.
So in a perfect world, we would have liked to have this done at nighttime, although it's obviously noisy for the folks who are near it. But State Department of Transportation, which owns Manville, very much wishes it to have it done by day when the temperatures are a little warmer and you get a better result. So Tough project, but the result at the end of that is that we are almost at the finish line of a very, very, very long project that I think is in the end going to be a really positive result for our downtown. So all in favor? Aye, motion approved. 378, Yemi.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes of the regular meeting held on October 28th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or corrections on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 379, back to you.
Whereas on October 16, 2024, the village board of trustees voted to approve a change order in the amount of $80,000 from Woodward and Curran for the purposes of additional design phases of the Nanahagan Brook Wall. And now therefore be resolved that the village board of trustees hereby authorize the village administrator to sign an amendment agreement with Woodward and Curran in the amount of $420,500. And further resolve, the village board of trustees hereby authorize the village administrator to sign an additional amended agreement to secure funding to Resilient Homes and Communities Program, RISC, in the amount of $200,000.
Is there a second? Want to give a quick summary, Eric?
Sure, so that $80,000, we previously discussed as the design of the two other phases of the Nanahagan Wall project does not mean we will undertake them now, but at least we'll have the design. And then we've secured $200,000 towards design expenses through the grant. And so these are the amendments to the contract that we need to be able to submit for reimbursement.
Great.
We just add a zero to the 200,000 in the first part. So that says.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
All in favor? Aye, motion approved. 380, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign the third amendment to the user agreement with Ticket Web for ticketing services associated with the Pleasantville Music Festival expiring November 30th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Renewing the relationship we've had the last several years. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 381, David.
So the Board of Trustees hereby suspends parking meter fees for the time allowed on 1, 2, and 3-hour meters from Thursday, November 28th, 2024 through December 26th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
We do this annually in an effort to be shopper friendly during the holiday season. Time limits still do apply. And so if you're at a 1-hour meter, you can't park there longer than an hour without being at risk of getting a ticket. We really do hope that people respect that. I can say that because it's harder to enforce without the meters, it sometimes produces a loss of available parking. And really the whole goal is to make the village more accessible and more welcoming to shoppers and folks going to the Burns and to restaurants and to stores. So, all in favor? Aye, motion approved. 382, Yami.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of Sharon Jimenez. Recreation Leader After School Program, job code 1047, effective November 7th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. Be reminded, if you're interested in working at Panther Club, there are always opportunities. Reach out to the rec department.
Can I ask one quick thing about the parking meter fees? Have we ever done it to January 1st, or did we do that?
We have,
Oh, okay, just curious.
I mean, first off, I can say there's a
I mean, it's very generous and just.
fairly significant loss of revenue. And the availability of parking is kind of a problem
Yeah.
during the time.
Does not like it.
He does not. No.
Just
He
curious.
doesn't. Donald Shoup, it's a high cost of free parking. All right, 383.
Back to me, right?
Back to Paul.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to execute an agreement with Tijan Venegas Consulting Engineer, PLC, for engineering services related to the boiler replacement at Village Hall.
Is there a second?
Second.
Owning buildings is a problem.
It is, yeah.
Only that building's.
Yeah, yeah, it looks really nice though on the outside. So yeah, the boilers are going. Good news is they're the original boilers that at one point heated the entire building. So the new boilers will be considerably smaller. We really only use the boilers for the second floor heating.
And.
Can they be electric or do they have to be gas?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're gonna look into the feasibility of all of that.
Okay.
Check.
Thermal?
No place to drill.
Drill straight down, baby.
Yeah, all in favor? Aye, motion approved. Painfully, they did drill straight down for the elevator shaft, which is a whole different problem. 384, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby schedules a public hearing on November 25th, 2024 at 8 p.m. to consider introductory local law 6, 2024, amending chapter 21 of the Pleasantville Village Code to expand the residency requirement of certain appointed officers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Pretty straightforward. Allowing us for certain appointed officers to appoint people from other counties.
That's right. Right now, it's currently restricted to Westchester County.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. David, 385.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes a change order in the amount of $20,999 from ELQ Industries for the purposes of additional construction material for the roadway pavement management program bid 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
So that was just additional materials that they needed to complete their repaving, our annual repaving program. A lot of that was landscaping behind curbing. That was placed.
All in favor?
That was, I mean, that's a significant amount. Do we have other change orders that were this large?
Yeah, but for the contract was, I want to say 650,000, so it's in line with what we.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of the paving is per square yard or per square foot, and it adds up fast.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 386, Amy.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the request from the Superintendent of Public Works to surplus the following vehicle. You want me to read the,
Yes,
okay. So
you don't need to read the VIN.
Okay.
Just in case anybody wants to check the park.
Fleet Vehicle 59 equipment manufacturer model is a 2012 Ford Fusion for the police department and VIN number. The miler 74,058 estimated salvaged revenues $500.
Is there a second?
Second.
Hopefully we get more than that.
That's right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Back to you, Paul. 387.
Result of the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes a change order in the amount of $24,100 from Wagner Hodgins for the purpose of additional construction administration for the Memorial Plaza Civic Space Project.
Is there a second?
Second, what's that about?
So we added they did an additional lighting design for us as construction occurred. We noticed that we wouldn't have enough lighting for the area. So what we're actually doing is a Cooley Street decorative lighting where we had extra. So we're going to put that in the area. We added scope to the sidewalk. Originally in front of the bike path that was going to remain that old sidewalk. So we're actually going to just redo it now.
Makes sense.
And then some other touches here and there. And
Sounds good.
construction oversight as well.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. 388. That's Dave's, right? Or was it? Who?
I just went.
Oh,
It's me,
Nicole,
but
then,
you
yes.
have to scroll so I can see it.
Okay, I will, but you have to start. You're gonna lose this if I scroll now.
388. There isn't anything in it. Okay.
Hold on.
Oh.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Whereas until 2024, cities, villages, and towns had not received an increase in unrestricted state aid AIM funding for 15 years, significantly impacting their ability to provide essential services to their residents. And whereas after a prolonged period without financial support, local governments finally received an increase of 50 million in an unrestricted state aid. And whereas local officials expressed their gratitude for the $15 million increase in unrestricted state aid, recognizing it as a positive step towards addressing longstanding funding challenges. And whereas the state has referred to this new aid as temporary municipal assistance, suggesting that such increase may not continue, jeopardizing the sustainability of crucial municipal programs and services. And whereas the property tax cap further limits the ability of local governments to properly fund the programs and services their residents need. And whereas increase in ongoing state aid for local governments is vital for maintaining infrastructure, public safety, housing, and other municipal services. And whereas the challenges of inflation, the increasing cost of labor and supplies, and the end of extraordinary federal aid only accentuate the need for consistent and predictable funding to effectively plan for the future and meet the growing needs of their residents. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village of Pleasantville calls upon the governor and the state legislature to commit to continuing the additional $50 million in unrestricted state aid in the 2025-26 state budget and beyond. And be it further resolved that the Village of Pleasantville urges state officials to recognize the need for a long-term plan that ensures consistent and predictable increases in financial support for local governments that keep pace with inflation.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is a resolution that is been organized by the New York State Conference of Mayors, seeking to get as many cities and villages as well as towns to sign on to this and send a very large stack of such resolutions to the legislature. I am happy to do that. I will say that the line that says we express gratitude for the $50 million increase is slightly hyperbolic. No change, literally not a penny more in this program for 15 years. A $50 million increase on a $700 and some million project was a ridiculously small addition. And I can tell you what the Village of Pleasantville out of this program gets what, $54,000 a year or something to that effect. So it's an embarrassingly low number, but you got to start somewhere. And kudos to NICOM for having gotten this 50 million last year, and maybe there is a sign of progress to come. All in favor? Aye. Motion approved. 389. David.
Resolve the Village Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the mayor to execute a contract with Food Chester Inc. to operate the Pleasantville Farmers Market through November 30th, 2026.
Is there a second?
Second.
Continuing our longstanding relationship with Food Chester.
Yep, no, we just had one minor change on the contract from the last time.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Comments, questions? All in favor? Aye, motion approved.
Great job.
Yemi, 390.
Yep. Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the following ticket rates for the 2025 Pleasantville Music Festival. For village residents tickets, November 29, 2024 to January 31st, 2025. General admission will be $50. Student senior admission not available. Festival patron, November 29, 2024 to January 31st, 2025 will be $150. And the student senior admission will be not available. Early bird winter ticket fest, November 29th, 2024 to January 31st of 2025. $60 for general admission, $45 for student senior admission. On sale February 1st, 2025 to June 27th, 2025. General admission, $75. Student senior admission, $55. 2 weeks before festival, June 28th, 2025, July 11th, 2025. It will be $80 for general admission, $60 for student senior admission. And the day of July 12th, 2025, will be $85 for general admission, and student senior admission is not.
Is there a second?
Second.
So we've had lots of discussion about this and have been talking to Doug Pinero, the new executive director, as well as outgoing executive director Bruce Figler, as well as a bunch of other folks in conversation on the village board. The thinking here is first off in that village resident time period, November 29 to January 31, to give the opportunity for village residents to get tickets way up front for $50. That's $35 less than the day of price. We've added a festival patron category at $150, which there'll be a few benefits attached to that, but it's largely an opportunity for some of the folks who love the festival to help keep this train running. And we do think that there are some folks out there who will be pleased to be identified as festival patrons and take advantage of the relatively few benefits we give, but they certainly will be called out in the program. And it's quite apparent that there are an awful lot of people that love this festival, and we need those people to help us out. Then it marches up as Yemi just read, but one important piece is that the student senior admission price continues as it has in the past through the early sales, but day of July 12, just a flat price of $85, no discount for students and seniors. So if you qualify for a student senior admission, you have a very high incentive to buy your ticket before day of up to July 11, 2025. So that's the thinking. And if you're on the music festival website or mailing list, you'll get information about this, telling you about each of these phases. But particularly to village residents, please take advantage of the chance to get a $50 price for an $85 day off ticket between November 29 and January 31. Other comments, thoughts, concerns? All in favor? Aye, motion approved. Paul, back to you, 391.
Result, the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of Raymond Castoldi, Recreation Assistant, Panther Club, effective November 7th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 3. That's the end, right?
318,
3.
the payment claims.
And we're on those. Yes. There it is. 392.
Five tax.
392, okay.
Yes.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract for payment of claims dated November 12th, 2024 for fiscal year ending 2025 from the general fund, $465,851.06. From the special fund, the purpose fund, $1,718.03. From the water fund, $230,750.89. From the capital fund, $137,240. From the refuse fund, $30,656.98. For a total of $857,217.96.
Is there a second? Couple of big hits there in the general fund, including our insurance payments.
That's correct. The capital fund was our first payment to JAPCO.
Right.
Civic Space.
Who's building the civic space. So,
Yep.
just to reassure you, we don't spend $857,000 every 2 weeks.
That's true.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. Any new business, any comments of any sort from a member of the public who is available on Zoom? If you have something to say, raise your hand in the chat.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one thing to chat about quickly, if I may. On the work session, we had a discussion on the service line inventory. Anthony Carr couldn't join us tonight, but we'll have a topic on the next work session with our consulting engineers. But residents will be getting letters in the mail.
And have already, in many cases.
That's right, got the
Received.
general notification. So we've completed our mandated inventory, which will identify or does identify service lines that have copper or galvanized material. Those will eventually need replacing.
Or lead.
Lead or galvanized, both of which will need to be replaced in the next 10 years. One category is no lead. We can verify that you have no lead on the service line. And then the third category is unknown. We're not able to verify through records, existing records. So we'll have a process that will be able to bring that undetermined number of properties down, which we'll explain at the next work session. So the EPA mandates this notification process as well as the inventory that we've created. Now we'll start working through a plan to actually remediate.
And this is going on all over the country.
Oh, yes, nationwide. Now, one thing just to say, if you do have a lead service line, there are ample opportunities to get your water tested. Likely it is, there's a what's known as a biofilm that has built up on the piping so that the water's not sitting there leaching the lead. But obviously there's probably a level of concern, can get that water tested, but that's likely gonna kind of mute the impact of the lead.
But it certainly would be a level of concern if you end up having to do some more. And that would be also a point to address the thing. So, all right, lots more to be said about that. All right. With that, is there a motion to go into executive session on contractual matters and matters of personnel?
So moved.
Second,
All
in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. We'll be back almost 2 weeks from today, Monday, November 25.